Welcome to the Impactus podcast, where we equip you as a man for a life of purpose and godly impact. And today we're talking with Lecrae about his new book, I Am Restored. But before we get into the conversation, we want to remind you that on April 16th, there is a free virtual men's event. You can check out all the details and register at impactus.org. Welcome, Lecrae, to the podcast. This book, you went deeper than I think anyone was expecting.
Yeah, some people, say it's too deep. You didn't have to tell all that, but
you know what's so refreshing about that? The church doesn't do this. The church doesn't talk about this kind of pain, and you did.
Yeah, well, thought it was necessary to just, it was healthy for me and healing for me, and so I wanted that for other people. Someone
asked me the other day, what's Crae's book all about? Basically, it's vulnerable, to say the least. It's extremely transparent. You cover depression, anxiety, church hurt, childhood trauma, sexual abuse, self-medication, racism, doubting God, a failing marriage, political homelessness, and so much more. Why did you write this book?
For me, it's twofold. One, I wrote it for people out there who were hurting and needed a voice. And I wrote it for people out there who were trying to understand my perspectives and just weren't getting a comprehensive view. And so now it's here. So whenever you're trying to understand, you can just I can say, here, read the book if you want to understand where I'm coming from. Yeah.
So you don't have to have a conversation anymore. Just hand them the book.
There you go.
There it is. Was there a part that was the hardest to write?
For me, it was stuff about my family and marriage, just because that's more private and personal. And of course, my wife had to be okay with me talking about some of those things. And then anything that's divisive, because I just know, whenever you start talking about terms that create division, they're not divisive, but things that people divide around, topics that people divide around, all that's always hard to write, because you just are wanting to make sure, did I get this right? Did I say this? Did I communicate this? Because there's so many people's perspectives that are peering into this.
You just lay it out basically from the beginning that you woke up in a fog. You woke up depressed. You woke up in a clinical depression. Can you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, something you don't forget. It was just waking up, and the best way I can describe it is like having a black and white filter over a photograph, and you can't remove the filter. You're trying to see the colors, you're trying to see the dynamics, but you just can't. And so you're waking up every day hoping that filter would go away, and you just can't make it go away. So it's, it inhibits your ability to just smile, to appreciate things, to be happy. It's just hard. Yeah.
And with that, you talked about even just everything was meaningless. It was, you didn't want to leave the house. You just started dragging down people around you. It's just you just weren't yourself. It completely was a different person.
Yeah. Didn't want to eat, didn't want to talk, didn't want to move, didn't want to go do the littlest things, shopping, anything. I was just, it was a dark, dark time. Very, very dark.
And it's not just based off of one thing. So we can't say what was the thing that got you there? It was a buildup of time, of many things over time. Yeah. And so can we go back and touch on a few of these places? So starts in childhood, right? You grew up without a father. You were told constantly that you weren't enough of a man. You were beat, you were molested, on top of many other things. How did you feel growing up as a kid? What was that like for you? Or was this just, hey, this is what kid life is like?
It was. That's exactly kind of how I felt. I did feel a little bit like it was me against the world. So, I was just kind of like, man, I got to go for it. I got to go enjoy life and have fun, because I don't know when this will end. There's nothing on the other side waiting for me. So I just got to go and and get it. The secure environment was not something that I grew up in. So for me, um, you're just a lot more reckless because there's chaos going on around you.
And what was your desire as a kid? Did you have a burning desire, or was it like, you're like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to do things different, or when I grow up, or it's just like, no, that's it.
No, unfortunately, I was what you would call a hedonist. I just wanted fun because I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. So I didn't look past 18 years old. I didn't know if I would be 18. So, I didn't really dream past 18 years old. I just thought, I'll turn 18, maybe. I just want to have fun, whatever fun looks like. And if that meant breaking the law, cool.
Growing up was tough. You found hip hop, you found acceptance in that. You became, legend at your high school, and you just kept going and going. You became a Christian in college, and then you got into the church world.
Yeah.
And things were okay. You got married, things were good, but then something started to happen. Talk about church hurt.
Yeah. As you are growing up without this secure family, the church becomes that for you. At least I thought it was, and I didn't expect to be disappointed. I didn't expect to have my world turned upside down. But as I started to navigate the church space, I would get a lot of pushback. Initially it would be for stuff musically, like you can't collaborate with certain artists. But then as I started speaking out against injustices, race and police brutality, a lot of the churches turned their backs on me. And I didn't understand. A lot of people within these churches turned their backs on me. And at the time I didn't get it. At the time, I didn't realize that I was, it wasn't God, it was God's people, but it still hurt like it was God. So I struggled heavily, and just found myself in a dark place, feeling as if, if this is how God's people are, this must be how God is. And why would I want to be with a God like this? It just disoriented me very badly.
So his people distorted who God was in a way.
Yeah.
You say a couple of things from the book. Let me just read this one part. Very, very quick. Our understanding of God is shaped by whose version of Christianity is most appealing to us. And I fully agree, because the North American church, you say the American church, I'm going to throw Canada in this too. So the North American church was late to the party for condemning racism.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like for you to see the church ignore racial issues?
Initially it was very unfortunate, very disheartening. Now I think it's just evidence of where we are in North America. We have kind of created our own version of what we think Christianity is supposed to be. And so that excludes certain things and includes certain things. And an example of that would just be where you exalt your nation above humanity. We're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. But when you love your neighbor as yourself, your nation can't come before the actual neighbors in the nation. And so in many ways, I get it. I totally get how we have made ourselves, we read the Bible and think of ourselves as David instead of seeing ourselves as, the prostitute who needs to come back home. And so until we see ourselves as the misfortunate, or see people who are marginalized and disenfranchised, the least of these, there'll always be issues like class systems or racism or any of those things. They're all the same symptom. I mean, they're just symptoms of the same disease. And that disease is um, an arrogance that puts someone above another person.
With all this, and there's more that's going on, but these things are just stewing in the background. And are you aware of this? Are you knowing how you're being triggered silently in a way?
Now I do. I didn't before. Historically, um, I kept at it until it was literally destroying me. Now, um, I'm very, very aware, and I won't engage in unhealthy ways. Sometimes you say what needs to be said, and then you move forward. But you can't sit and stew and argue, and that's a waste of my time and energy.
In this time, how are you coping with it all? So this is, and we're not just talking about what's just happened in 2020. I think it was 2014 is when you said in your book that you started to really start to talk and speak out against the church in racial matters. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So 2014, you start voicing your opinion on equality and how the church basically is saying, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah. The problem with, even in the civil rights movement, the civil rights movement, the church led that. The problem with what we're seeing now is that the church isn't leading it. And so there's other organizations or people groups leading it that the church may not necessarily agree with, but it doesn't mean that these issues don't still need to be dealt with. And so what the church in many ways, in many respects has done is it said, well, we don't like the way this is being handled, so we're going to sit this one out. Instead of saying, well, we're going to find a way to either work with these people and organizations, or B, spearhead something that addresses the same issue that may be separate, but something has to be done. And I think there's just a huge misunderstanding, humongous lack of education and understanding. People don't know what we're looking at, and they believe the whatever news outlets tell them is going on, instead of having proximity and having relationships with people and understanding the realities of what we're facing.
So with all this going on, you go into this clinical depression.
Yeah.
How do you start coping with this? How do you start dealing with this?
Yeah, it's a drift. You don't fall into chaos. You drift into it. It's like, you know what? I'm stressed. I'm drained. Forget it. Let's have a drink, and then tomorrow we'll have two, and then the next day we'll have three, and then four, and then I just I'm starting to find unhealthy ways to cope, and you know what? I'm making bad decisions, and now let's get a prescription, and it's just a world of stuff that you slowly inch your way into before it gets out of control. You don't just dive in and all of a sudden you're drinking a bottle of liquor and popping pills. You're meditating and ruminating on these issues, and you're frustrated and you're trying to process. And I remember laying on my bed, laying on the floor actually, and just saying, God, I don't know if you're real. And you got to convince me you are real, because this is chaos right now. And it just got to a very dark place. I didn't want to do Bible study with my kids. I was like, I just don't know if this thing is real. Because of the voices that I've grown accustomed to listening to don't see these issues that I'm bringing up. And so I don't want to assume I know something they don't know, but they don't seem to think this is an issue. And so I just found myself in a stupor. And I remember, reading a lot of books from atheists and non-believers who were dealing with the issue of race far better than believers were. And it really messed me up, because now I'm like, why are people outside the church dealing with this better? And, just it spiraled me out of a healthy perspective.
Yeah. It took you to a place where you say you wanted to hand in the towel.
Yeah.
Like, was that for real? Like, you really wanted to give up on like walk away from it all?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, I was done, mind you, I know all of the biggest leaders in this space. People were thinking I was on the verge of being one of the next Christian leaders. And so I'm walking in these spaces. I'm at the White House. I'm seeing all this stuff, but I'm not seeing solutions. And so I'm thinking to myself, this is all fake. This is all a charade. None of this is real. And it took a process of deconstruction before I could be reconstructed.
And so part of that, from what I'm reading, is you're done with the label. You're done with Christian hip hop, period. You're done with Lecrae. You want to move away. And at this moment, you're so vulnerable. You even say you're done with your marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in a last ditch effort, what do you do?
Last ditch effort, we go to Egypt. I'm saying, hey, let me just start fresh. Let me just spend some time with my wife and let's see if we can try to build something and figure some stuff out. But, the funny thing is when you're trying to fix a marriage without working on yourself, it's a futile attempt because you're trying to fix something without fixing you're the part of the problem. You know what I mean? And so if you don't deal with you can't deal with us. And so I didn't have those tools. I didn't understand that. And I had to, it was a great process where God started to help me understand that, Lecrae, you don't have this whole thing figured out. And he was very gracious to me and walked me through some stuff, and I wish I would have been more attentive than I was at the time, but it was a process for me to get where I'm at.
One of the stories that I love that you share in the book is when you're on tour with Jill Scott and you think about maybe like, yeah, I could become a part of the Eastern Orthodox religion. I could do that, and then you go hop on stage, and then who shows up in the dressing room backstage?
Eastern Orthodox priest. It was so wild. I was really wild. I was like, and God was trying to let me know, listen, I'm here and I'm bigger than you understand. Part of it, sometimes you don't want to listen, right? Because that means you got to put the bottle down. That means you got to let go of the pills. That means you got to follow. And it's easier to just say, I don't believe anything, so I can do what I want to do, and unfortunately, that's the pathway to destruction. And so I had to learn that the hard way. Yeah.
And you talk about after coming back from Egypt, the last resort for you was just to be transparent, just to completely humiliate yourself and be humble in front of the closest people in your lives. Because up to that moment, who in your life knew really all that was going on?
Nobody. Yeah.
Really?
No, I mean, I have friends who had inklings and ideas, but sometimes, you feel like you're whining about your struggles. I mean, I'm more well off than they are. I've got awards. I've got all this stuff going for me. And then I'm coming to them complaining about, woe is me. My life is so bad. And I just was like, I'm embarrassed. I don't want to talk about that. And a lot of my friends were hurting, in different ways, but there was just a lack of full transparency that, I hadn't yet offered. And part of it was because I was just bitter, I was bitter and I didn't want to go there. But once you get to the end of yourself, you realize how beneficial it is to just open up to the closest people and let them walk with you as you heal.
What was it like for you just to finally share that with your friends, with your wife?
Yeah, it's a step toward healing, because now you're saying that's like walking into the hospital, right? If you have a disease or you're sick or you break your arm, walking into the hospital does not make you better. Walking to the hospital is the first step toward getting better. And so I think a lot of times we think, oh, shoot, I don't want to walk in there. But then once you do, you realize, man, these people care about you. They're there to help you. They're there to walk with you. Um, and yeah, if you tell your doctor, oh man, I got this pain in my stomach, and the doctor's like, okay, well, what's going on? Well, of course, it's going to be embarrassing to say that I ate 6 gallons of ice cream, right? That's embarrassing. But even after you go through that, the doctor's then going to say, all right, let's help you work through this. And that's what my family, my friends, my wife all did. Was there's the initial like, what? Everyone's going to respond differently. Some people will say, I can't believe this. Why didn't you tell me? Other people will say, man, this is crazy. I don't know what to do. But in the end, they all, if they really love you and care about you, they'll figure it out with you, because you will all figure it out together.
And from that moment, did they disown you or did they walk with you?
They walked with me. Yeah, absolutely. They walked with me. Still walking with me to this day, years later.
Amazing. What is that moment? Was there fear there prior to this? Like, is there a reason why you didn't go to them earlier?
Yeah, we're all afraid of being rejected. At the end of the day, we're afraid of being rejected by those we love. If you're not afraid of being rejected, then you're just prideful to admit that you don't have it all together. But both of them are forms of pride. One is an inverted pride that says, it's so focused. Both are focused on self. One is exalted self. I can't let anyone see that I'm not as perfect as I think I am. The other is a focus on self that's so consumed with you that if someone rejects you, you don't know how you'll go on living anymore. And, I was the second. It was like, oh no, I've been rejected by my family, rejected by my father. I can't take being rejected by my friends or my wife. And, God had to let me know, like, no matter what happens, I got you and I'll never reject you. I'll never forsake you. And that was a game changer for me.
And the great thing about how you describe this is your process, like everyone else's process, is not overnight. I think you described it as an 18-month process.
Yeah.
And still from then to now, there's been change probably from then to now too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Different issues now, but you walk through them,
Yeah. There's always more.
Yeah. There's always restoration is not a destination. It's a journey, baby.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like giving up though? Even though once you had sort of like confessed, you've thrown it, you've told everyone what's up. Now the work is now ahead of you. The doctor has been in, he's telling you this is what you need to do now to get healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's generally, there's always going to be some consequences from your actions, or, there's just lasting things that are always the case. When someone passes away, years can go by. It still affects you, right? You may still cry at the thought of them. There's lasting effects of decisions and of experiences. And so, you want to quit because you're still feeling those effects. But as time goes on, the effects don't go away. You just know how to deal with them better. You know how to manage them better. You still get a little choked up when you think about dad being gone, but you're not distraught and depressed and you want to lay in your bed all day. You're like, man, that stings, and we move forward. And so early on, you do want to quit because you're like, this is too much, having to face myself and face this reality. And how do I do this? It's a lot, but we keep moving forward. And I don't want to say I did this alone. I had therapists and pastors around me as well. So that all of that was very necessary.
It was so heartwarming for me when you were talking about the friends circling around you. Like basically they were there for you. And it makes me think of like David in the Bible. He was known to be a conqueror, a warrior, but he also ruled with his mighty men. And who would David be without his mighty men?
Exactly. He needed them. Needed his Jonathan, needed his Nathans, needed his mighty men to go through that journey. To
hear someone like you admit these things,
mm-hmm.
it gives hope for so many people. It gives hope for me. It gives hope because you went through the process. The fire was hot, but you made it through.
Absolutely.
Where do you think you'd be if you didn't confess? If you didn't take that trip to Egypt, or if you just ignored God, basically? Because he would have tried it another way. You know that.
Yeah. I honestly think, it'd be dark. Honestly, I think God is the one that stopped me in my tracks. I don't think there was an end in sight. I think, similar to, I think I saw my fate like Samson, like I'm just going to keep going down this pathway until I'm blinded, you know what I mean? And so, I'm grateful that I was stopped in my tracks where I was, because who knows? Who knows?
You talked about your dad, and you got to reconnect with your dad after many years of not seeing him. When was the last time you saw him before you reconnected with him?
I was probably 5. I saw him once, the one time he came to visit me. So I was probably about 5 years old. So I hadn't seen him in all that time.
Wow. I'm not trying to get your age out of you right now, but that a long period of time.
Decade.
1, maybe 2 decades. But what was that like to reconnect? Because you put that video out for people to see. What was that like after the cameras turned off and you went home?
It was great. I mean, I couldn't have asked for more. I had managed my expectations, and I got more than what I had imagined. And, I had questions answered that I had always had.
Has your relationship continued to this day?
Yeah. I mean, he lives miles away, but he's always a text away, a phone conversation away. And, if I when the world opens back up and I can get back out to the West Coast, then, we can have more conversations and sit down and continue talking.
You talk about in your book that you can't always change the situation. You can't always change the situation, but you can be changed in your situation. That is a great way to look at, no matter what's going on, where we're at. We can't always control everything, but we can allow ourselves to be changed by God, by people that surround us, by reading the Bible, by great mentors. I think this is just an incredible tool for so many people that are going through hurt, going through pain, but people just to get a good perspective of how life has been like for someone that they've followed for so long. Mm-hmm. So thank you for writing this. What's the one hope from this that you have that everyone takes away? What's the one hope from this book that everyone takes away?
That you're never too far gone, that this is not the end. Whatever it is you're dealing with or battling or wrestling with, you're never too far to find restoration. It's going to look different for everybody, but it's not out of reach, regardless of what it is. I don't care, whatever the situation is, you're not too far.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Impactus podcast. To learn more about living a life of purpose and godly impact, check out impactus.org.